Hey there, it's Laurie. Today I'm making a new Valentine's Day heart wreath with a bit of a farmhouse vibe, and I'm also sharing 4 of my other favorite Valentine's Day wreaths. I did use mostly Dollar Tree supplies along with a couple of things that I had on hand. As always, I hope you have fun crafting with me, so let's get busy. Getting started, I'm using one of the wire heart wreath forms from the Dollar Tree. I'm using 3 of the flour sack towels, and you can find these in the kitchen department at the Dollar Tree, and I pretty much used about 2.5. Depending on the length and the thickness of your strips, you may use a little more or a little less. When you open the towel up, you'll see that you get a pretty big piece of fabric. It does have finished edges, and you don't want to see those on your wreath, so I just used my scissors and I cut them off. I'm cutting the fabric strips for my wreath 1 inch wide and 9 inches in length. That's just the size that I decided for my wreath, but you can always make yours longer or wider. As I was cutting them, I did my best to keep them at about a 1 inch width, but honestly, they were not all perfect, and once you add them to the wreath, no one will ever notice. It is important, though, to make sure that they are all the same length. I didn't cut my strips all at once. I used a bunch, and then I went back and cut some more. Adding the fabric strips onto the heart wreath form is super easy, and this wired wreath form has 2 separate sections. I placed 1 strip around the 2 outside wires, made sure that the 2 ends matched up, and then I tied them into a knot. I added my second strip, wrapping it around the 2 inside wires, making sure the ends matched up, and then tying those 2 into a knot. From there, I alternated back and forth until I had 20 strips in place. After I've knotted each strip, I'm making sure that I'm pushing them tightly together. I'm adding on an accent ribbon, and I'm attaching mine after I add on the 20 strips. You can add your accent ribbon in between more or less of the strips, or you can just omit it completely. Now that I'm done, I have all 20 of my strips knotted and in place. For the accent ribbon, I'm using a 5/8 inch red and white gingham, and I picked this up at the Dollar Tree. I'm cutting these ribbons in 6-inch lengths, and I'm using 11 in my wreath. When I was done to finish them up, I cut each end off at an angle. With my 20 strips of fabric tied and in place, I'm now adding on my 6-inch piece of red and white gingham ribbon. I wrapped it around the center wire on the form, and this time I only tied it in half once. From there, I added on 20 strips of fabric, and in between each, I attached an accent ribbon. During the holidays, I made a similar wreath using the round wreath form from the Dollar Tree. If you prefer to make a round wreath, or if you can't find the heart form, I'll link that video below. All you'll need to do is change up your ribbons and add in a different sign. Now that my wreath is complete, I'm using my scissors to clean up the bottom and give it a bit of a point. I snipped a little bit off here and there and cleaned up the edges. I then turned my wreath over and I rounded off the top. I also added a small V in the center to give it that classic heart shape. When I was done, I then turned my wreath over, and once again I used my scissors to clean up those inside edges. You can always hang the wreath as is, but I'm adding a simple bow to mine. I'm using a 2.5-inch wired red and white gingham ribbon, and I picked this up at the Dollar Tree. I'm also using a 1.5-inch wired red and white plaid ribbon, and I had this on hand. To make my bow, I'm using my bow maker, and you can find these on Amazon. I'm starting with my 2.5-inch ribbon, and I'm making a 12-inch tail. I'm then making 2 4-inch loops and finishing off with another 12-inch tail. I'm adding on my plaid ribbon, and once again I'm making 2 12-inch tails, but this time I'm making 4 3-inch loops. To attach my bow together, I'm using a long piece of floral wire. I'm wrapping it over the center, pulling down both sides, and then twisting it tightly on the back. And now that I'm done, I'm just fluffing out the loops. You can always leave the ribbon tails as is. You can dovetail them. I'm going to cut mine off at an angle. I'm adding my bow to the wreath. I'm placing the 2 ends of the wire around it and then just twisting them tightly in the back. There was a little extra wire left over, so I just snipped it off with my clippers. Because this is a Valentine's Day wreath, I'm going to add a little heart accent into the center of the bow. I'm using a small wooden heart from the Dollar Tree, and I'm painting it with some white acrylic paint. Now that it's dry, I used my hot glue gun and attached it into the center of my bow. I gave the ribbon tails just a little bit of a curl, and now that I'm done, my Farmhouse Valentine's Day wreath is ready to hang. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below and leaving me a thumbs up. And if you tap on the notification bell, you will be notified every time I upload a new video. To all my returning friends, you're very special to me, and I love reading everyone's comments below. Getting started, I'm using one of the 14-inch wire wreath forms from the Dollar Tree. For the base of my wreath, I'm using 4 of these red fabric table runners, and I picked these up at the Dollar Tree as well. To attach the fabric to the form, I'm using 24 red chenille stems. I picked these up at the Dollar Tree in several packages, and you don't have to use red, but I wanted mine to match the fabric. I'm getting started by placing 1 chenille stem on the 2 outside wires and twisting it into place. I'm now adding on the second chenille stem, and once again, I'm attaching it to the 2 outside wires and twisting it into place. As I'm adding them, I am centering them in the section. With those in place, I'm following the same pattern. I'm adding 2 chenille stems per section on the 2 outside wires. I'm just continuing on adding my chenille stems and working my way around the form. With my first set of chenille stems attached in place, I'm now flattening them down so they point to the outside. Even though I did twist them in place as tightly as I could, they do have a tendency to slide on the metal, so I'm going to use my hot glue gun and add a dot of hot glue to each side of the chenille stem to help hold them in place. While you're adding it, the hot glue does drip down a bit, so to keep my workspace clean, I did add a piece of waxed paper underneath. To add on the next set of chenille stems, I'm first adding one around the 2 inside wires support on the form. With that in place, I'm now adding my next chenille stem. I'm wrapping it around the 2 inside wires, centering it between the 2 that I had attached on the outside and twisting it into place. From there, I'm going to continue following the same pattern around the form. I'm placing one around the 2 inside wire support, then adding on the next, centering it between the 2 outside wires and wrapping it around the 2 inside. When they were all attached, I once again flattened them out, used my glue gun, added a couple of dots of hot glue to help hold them in place. With that complete, and to make the fabric easier to attach, I'm flattening down the middle chenille stems into the center. Before I attach the fabric, I'm first opening up the outside chenille stems. I'm starting on the pointed end of the fabric and I'm gathering up about 3 to 4 inches. Then using half a chenille stem, I'm going to attach the fabric together. I'm now placing the pointed end under the middle support on the form. Once I have it in place, I'm then turning the form over and attaching the chenille stems to the wire. Now with that in place, I'm attaching the fabric to the first outside chenille stem. I'm then folding the 2 sides of the fabric under and I'm measuring out 8 inches. I'm then making a ruffle and attaching it to the next outside chenille stem. I'm now measuring out another 8 inches of fabric, making sure to keep the 2 sides under. And once again, after I make my ruffle, I attach it to the next chenille stem. From there, I continue making my 8-inch ruffles until I come to the end of the fabric. When I come to the end, I'm then tucking that little tail in between 2 of the inside wire supports. So I can see how they're starting to fill out the wreath. I'm just going around and giving them a little fluffing. To add on my next table runner, I'm once again gathering the pointed end at about 3 to 4 inches. This time, because my wreath is already started, I'm not going to gather it together with a chenille stem. Instead, I'm tucking it in between the 2 center wire supports. And now I'm attaching this to the last chenille stem that I had attached my fabric to. It's really important that you make sure that the 2 sides of that fabric is tucked under as you're adding on those ruffles. When I finally come full circle, I'm attaching the last outside ruffle to the first outside chenille stem. I'm now moving to the center, once again measuring out my 8 inches of fabric and attaching it to the next chenille stem. And once again, when I came to the end, I just tucked that little tail in between the two center wires. Here comes my next table runner, and once again I'm attaching about 3 to 4 inches of the pointed end under the two center wires. I'm then attaching the fabric to the last chenille stem that I had used. From there, just continue adding on those 8-inch ruffles until once again you come to the end of the fabric. I've made some different wreaths using Dollar Tree table runners, and I'll have that playlist linked below in case you'd like to check it out. I'm now adding on my last table runner, and I'm following the same instructions as I did with my last two. And this time I'm only going to be using a short piece of the fabric. When I make my last ruffle, I'm once again adding that to the first chenille stem that I started when I began the center. With my ruffles finally complete, I cut about a 6-inch tail from the leftover fabric, and then I just tucked it under those two center wires. With the hard work finally complete, I'm now working my way around the wreath, and I'm just kind of fluffing out all those ruffles. If you're looking to make a simple Valentine's Day, Christmas, or patriotic wreath, I think you could add on a pretty bow and it would be ready to hang. To hide the excess chenille stems that are sticking up, I'm first folding them over the ruffle. I'm turning the wreath over, I'm twisting them together on the back, and then I'm just folding them down. I continued working my way around the wreath until they were all hidden on the back. I'm adding on some mesh curl accents, and I'm using some of the white and the pink mesh from the Dollar Tree. I'm cutting them at 10-inch lengths, and to make them easier to cut, I cut out a 10-inch piece of cardboard. I'm wrapping the white mesh around the cardboard 8 times, and I'm doing this twice to get 2 sets of 8 10-inch mesh. For the pink, I wrapped it around 8 times, so I had 8 pieces of 10-inch mesh. To attach the mesh curls together, I'm using 8 pieces of floral wire. I'm starting by first rolling a piece of white mesh into a curl, and then I'm just tucking it between my fingers. I'm now rolling my pink mesh into a curl, and once again I'm tucking it between my fingers. To finish up, I'm rolling one more piece of white mesh into a curl. I'm now pinching all 3 together tightly and placing my floral wire over the top. I'm then pulling it against the curls and twisting it tightly on the bottom. With my first bunch complete, I'm now going ahead and making 7 more. The Dollar Tree mesh does have a tendency to fray, so what I like to do is just add a coat of hairspray to it. It's not a perfect fix, but it does help it out just a bit. To add the bunches to the wreath, I'm wrapping the wires around the form and twisting them together on the back. When I'm done, I just bend my wires over, but you can always clip them off if you'd like. With those in place, I'm now adding on the second bunch directly across from the first. My third bunch, I'm now centering between my first 2. And now my fourth, I'm attaching directly across from my third. I'm now attaching my 5th by centering it between two of the mesh bunches. With that in place, the 6th bunch goes directly across from the 5th. And now the 7th and the 8th fill in the 2 open spaces on the wreath. I always add my bunches on this way because for me, it's the easiest way to attach them evenly onto the wreath. For the ribbon accents, I'm using some of this pretty 2.5-inch heart ribbon and pink sheer ribbon. These came from the Dollar Tree, along with some white 2.5-inch burlap ribbon, and this came from Family Dollar. I'm once again using my 10-inch cardboard. I'm wrapping the ribbon around it 8 times and cutting it off at both ends. I'm also doing the same for the pink sheer and the white burlap ribbon. With my ribbons all cut, I'm now going to dovetail the ends, and this is super easy. You just fold the ribbon in half and cut away the end at an angle. With all my ribbons dovetailed, it's now time to make them into bunches. To attach my ribbons together, I'm once again using 8 pieces of floral wire. I'm making 2 different ribbon bunches, 4 of each, and I'm starting with the white on the bottom, the pink sheer in the center, and the heart ribbon on the top. I make sure the ends match up. I fold it in half to find my center, give it a little pinch, and then wrap the floral wire around the top and twist it tightly on the bottom. After making 4 of those, for my next 4, I'm starting with the heart ribbon on the bottom, the pink sheer, and the white ribbon. Once again, I make sure the ends line up. I fold it in half to find my center, give it a little pinch, and then place the floral wire over the top and twist it on the bottom. Now that I'm done, I have my 8 bunches, 2 sets of 4 each. I'm adding my ribbon bunches, starting with the hearts on the top. I'm adding it on the wreath between the mesh curls. I'm placing the 2 wires around the center support and then twisting them tightly, and then I just fold mine down, but you can snip yours off if you'd like. From there, I'm adding my next bunch directly across from my first, and once again, I'm placing the 2 wires down around the center supports and twisting them together tightly. For the next bunch, I'm evenly spacing it between my first 2. By doing this, the ribbon bunches with the hearts on the top will be evenly spaced around the wreath. For my last ribbon bunch with the hearts on the top, I'm placing it directly across from the third. With those all in place, I'm now adding on my 4 ribbon clusters with the white on the top. I'm adding these 4 bunches in the open spaces between the mesh curls. These are the colors and the patterns that I chose for my wreath, but you can always change them up to fit your style. Now that they're all added, I'm just going to work my way around the wreath and kind of fluff out the ribbons. As an accent in the middle of my bows, I'm using some of this white mesh tubing from the Dollar Tree. I'm just going to make simple bows with it, and I'm giving each one about a 5-inch tail. I wasn't super fussy with the length, and you can always make yours longer or shorter, or you can even omit this step. Now that all 8 are complete, I'm adding a dot of hot glue to the center of each bow. And now it's as easy as attaching the mesh bow with the tails facing outwards. As I was adding them, I did use my finger protector to help protect my finger from some hot glue that was seeping out from some of those mesh bows. As one more accent for my bows, I'm using some sparkly hearts from the Dollar Tree, and I'm using 4 of the red and 4 of the pink. This time I'm adding some hot glue in the center of each mesh bow, and I'm alternating the colors of the hearts, pink and red, and just working my way around the wreath. If you don't have any of these on hand, the Dollar Tree does sell some wooden heart stickers in pink and red, and those would work great too. For the center of your Valentine's Day wreath, you can pretty much use anything. I'm using this Dollar Tree Valentine's gnome stake. And I'm just using a butter knife to remove the stake from the back of the gnome. I'm placing the gnome in the center of my wreath, and I'm adjusting the ribbons and the mesh curls. Now that I have him exactly where I want him, I'm using some hot glue to attach him in place. For the final accent on my gnome, I made one of the white tube mesh bows, and using my glue gun, I attached it to his hat. And with that, my Dollar Tree Valentine's Day gnome wreath is ready to hang. To start my purple rose heart wreath, I'm using one of the Dollar Tree's wire heart wreath forms. To cover the heart, I'm using some of the purple mesh from the Dollar Tree, but you can always use some matching ribbon or even some fabric. To attach the mesh, I'm adding some hot glue onto the wire wreath form and attaching one end. From there, I just continued adding on some hot glue here and there, and I kept wrapping the mesh around the form. I'm adding the mesh onto the form to give me something to attach my purple roses to. And I'm using the purple mesh because once I add the roses, if I used another color, you may see it peeking out in between them. Once the heart was completely covered, I just cut off the excess and attached the end to the form. For my flower accent, I'm using 7 bunches of these beautiful purple roses from the Dollar Tree. I'm only using the roses, so I removed each one from the stems. On the end of each rose, there's a shorter stem, and I'm cutting it off just about halfway. This will make it much easier for me to attach them to the form. With all the ends trimmed, they're now ready to attach to the wreath. This part is super easy. I'm just adding some hot glue to the form and placing down the 2 roses. As you're adding them, you do have to hold them in place for about 30 seconds or so until the hot glue starts to cool. This is one of the easiest wreaths I think I've ever made, and I just love these purple roses. I just kept adding on the hot glue and the roses side by side and working my way around the heart. I thought this color purple was perfect for Valentine's Day, but if you prefer something different, Dollar Tree does offer a selection of different colored roses. You can also add on a ribbon accent once you're done. I was thinking about it, but then when I was finished with the wreath, it was so pretty, I thought I would just leave it simple and elegant. Now that I have them all attached, I just worked my way around the form and fluffed out my roses. And with that, this purple rose heart is ready for Valentine's Day. To start my Valentine's Day wreath, I'm using one of the heart-shaped wire wreath forms, and I picked this up at the Dollar Tree. I'm going to wrap the form, and I'm using some white ribbon that I had on hand. You can pretty much use any white ribbon, and the reason I'm wrapping the form is that I don't want the wires to show through. I'm adding some hot glue to one of the lower supports and then attaching my white ribbon. From there, I wrapped the ribbon around the form, and every once in a while I added on some hot glue to help hold it in place. To make the ribbon easier to work with, I did cut about 3-foot length, and it was just easier to wrap it around the heart. As I was wrapping the heart, I wasn't super fussy. I just made sure that the ribbon was overlapping itself and it was hiding those wires. I continued working my way around, wrapping the ribbon until the heart was completely covered and you couldn't see any of the wires. To add some color to my heart, I'm using 2 of these pretty Valentine's Day scarves, and I picked these up at the Dollar Tree. The end of each scarf was sewn together, so I just used my scissors to cut them free. They each have a little tag, so I made sure to remove that as well. Now that I have my 2 strips of fabric, it's as easy as wrapping them around the form. I gathered the ends of the fabric together, I turned my heart over, added on some hot glue, and attached the fabric in place. I let the glue set up for about a minute, and then I turned my heart over. I had the fabric folded in half, but it wasn't a perfect half, and then I just started wrapping it around the heart. As I was working my way around, I did keep tension on the fabric so that it stayed tightly against the heart. But if you find it kind of moving around, you can always add some hot glue in the back to help hold it in place while you're wrapping it. When I came to the end of the fabric, I hot glued the end of the scarf onto the back of my heart. To add on my second scarf, I followed the exact same instructions. I just gathered the end of the fabric, added some hot glue to the back of my heart, and attached it in place. And if you notice, I was using a finger protector while I was letting it set up and cool because the fabric on the scarf is pretty thin and it is really easy to burn yourself. With my first scarf in place, I then followed the same instructions and wrapped the second around my heart. I once again made sure to wrap it tightly around the form, and when I came to the end, I hot glued it onto the back. To add a hanger to the back of my wreath, I'm using some pink satin ribbon that I had on hand, and I cut a piece at about 3 to 4 inches. I added 2 dots of hot glue onto the back and then attached the hanger. I'm adding a bow accent onto my wreath, and I'm using my easy bow maker that I picked up on Amazon. I'm using a pretty 2.5-inch sheer pink ribbon along with a 5/8 inch heart ribbon, and both of these came from the Dollar Tree. I'm also using the 5/8 inch pink satin ribbon that I had on hand. I'm starting with my 2.5-inch pink ribbon. I'm giving myself 2 10-inch tails and 6 4-inch loops. Once that's complete, I'm using my heart ribbon. I'm giving myself 2 8-inch tails and 4 3-inch loops. I'm then following it up with my pink ribbon. Once again, 2 8-inch tails and 4 3-inch loops. To attach my bow together, I'm using a piece of floral wire. I'm placing it over the center top, pulling it tightly and twisting it in the back. Now that I have it attached together, I'm just fluffing out the loops. To attach the bow to my wreath, I'm placing the 2 pieces of floral wire around the form and just twisting it on in the back. Now that it's attached in place, to help hold it there, I'm going to add on a little bit of hot glue. With the bow in place, you can hang your heart as is, but I'm going to add on 2 more accents. I'm adding one of these wooden love signs. They come as a 2-pack, and I picked this up at the Dollar Tree. I'm using my red acrylic paint, and I'm giving it a complete coat. Now that it's dry, I'm finding its placement in the center of my wreath, and I'm hot gluing the 2 ends in place. For my wreath's final accent, I'm using one of these small sparkly hearts, and these came from the Dollar Tree. Using my glue gun, I just attached it in the center of the bow. And with that, this pretty Valentine's Day wreath is ready to hang. For my love heart wreath, I'm using 2 of the hanging love hearts from the Dollar Tree. I'm taking them apart and cutting them free from each other. So when I'm done, I'll have 12 in total. I'm giving each one a backing, and I'm using one of the red Dollar Tree tote bags and some of their white fabric. I'm giving 4 of the hearts a red background, and I'm tracing 2 hearts on the front of the bag and 2 on the back. After all 4 are traced, I'm then just cutting them out. Now that I have my 4 red hearts, I'm following the same instructions for the white. With those all cut out and set aside, I'm now painting the wooden hearts. I'm using Mars Black, Scarlet, and Titanium White. For this wreath, I'm painting all 8 of my hearts and giving them a black border. I gave them a chance to dry, and now I'm painting 4 of the word love in red and 4 of the word love in white. Now that all 8 are completely dry, I need to hide those 2 hanger holes on each. I'm using some of these flat bottom pearl accents. They come from the Dollar Tree, and they each have a sticky backing. I removed them from the package and placed one over each hanger hole. With all of those in place, I'm using my matte finish Mod Podge and giving each heart a coat. Now that they're dry, I'm attaching the white fabric onto the back of the red love hearts. I turned all 4 of them over and then added a generous amount of Mod Podge to the back and then attached the white heart fabric. When all my white were complete, I then followed the same instructions for the red. I'm attaching my 8 hearts to a 9.8-inch styrofoam wreath, and you can pick this up at the Dollar Tree. You can always paint your wreath form, but I'm using one of their red scarves to wrap mine. I added some hot glue onto the form and attached one end of the scarf. From there, I just started wrapping it around, and then every here and there I'd add on a little hot glue to help hold it in place. I wasn't super fussy as I was adding it. I just continued wrapping it around and adjusting the fabric so that it fit tightly around the form. When I was done, I finished up by attaching the end of the scarf to the wreath. I'm first adding on my red hearts, and I'm placing them across from each other on the form. I'm now adding some hot glue under each to help hold them in place. With those attached in place, I'm now adding on the white, and I'm centering them in the middle of each red heart. And now, just like my first 4, I'm using my hot glue to attach them in place. I'm making a bow for my wreath, and I'm using some of this 2.5-inch buffalo check ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I'm also using this pretty Valentine's heart ribbon. It's 1.5 inch, and I picked it up at the Wreath Shop, which is an online business. I'm using my bow maker, and I'm giving myself 2 5-inch tails and 4 4-inch loops. I'm now adding on the heart ribbon, and once again I'm giving myself 2 5-inch tails and 4 4-inch loops. To attach my bow together, I'm using a piece of floral wire. I'm wrapping it over the top and twisting it together tightly on the bottom. I then fluffed out my loops. I'm dovetailing the ends, which is super easy. You just fold the ribbon in half and cut away the ends at an angle. I snipped the excess wire off on the back. I added some hot glue to the center of one of my red hearts, and I attached the bow in place. And with that, this Valentine's Day wreath is complete. Here we are at the end of the video, and I really hope you had fun crafting these Valentine's Day wreaths with me. If you're new to my channel and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. If you're looking for more home decor ideas, I'll link some at the end of this video as well as in my description below. I hope you all have a safe and amazing day, and until next time, bye everybody!